Laurence Gilman is the former assistant general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, NHL executive in Toronto, Winnipeg, Phoenix as well. He joins us from his home, and he still has a tan. Blake is getting a tan in Hawaii. Mike, I feel left out. We got to go somewhere hot, buddy. Nice to see you, LG. How goes?
Things are well. How are you guys? Things are good in Vancouver today after a monumental win last night.
Everything's okay.
Let's start right there because you know it well. The emotion swings in this market after wins and after losses. Like talking to Nalveen, I've talked about it. How hard do Vancouver Canucks employees and players have to work at staying even keel, given how emotionally erratic this market can be sometimes?
Well, I've said this before to you guys. If there's an old adage, if you think like a fan, you'll soon be sitting among them. If you're going to work in this business, and if you can't maintain an even keel after each game, whether it's a win or whether it's a loss, then you're not going to survive in this business. And it's interesting. I've told many coaches I've worked with, particularly I remember having this conversation with Sheldon Keefe. Alain Vigneault, if you walked into Alain Vigneault's office after a game, you wouldn't know if he won or lost the game. His demeanor was exactly the same. And I've worked with coaches where, they put rules in where there's no music in the room after a loss, or, there's no beer in the coach's office or whatever the case is. And, for my money, you can't go up and down like a toilet seat. You need to, measure the losses. You can play great and lose, and you can play lousy and win. And it's an 82 game schedule. There's lots of ups, there's lots of downs. Now, that being said, that was a win they had to have. And as a manager or a coach, you're looking at that game as a game that our group can build something from and gain momentum from, particularly as you're going out on a road trip that is essentially probably going to make or break your season. At this point in time. So
we saw them get some chances off the rush and score off the rush, and that's been a big Achilles heel for this team this season, and really kind of under Rick Tocchet. Has there ever been a moment that you remember where you guys saw something in a game and you thought that you needed to say something to the coach of, like, we need to play like that? Like, it was, I know you guys let the coaches coach, but is there ever a moment where you guys were tempted to be like, yeah, like that's what's been missing here, or you just assume they know?
Well, I mean, again, I'm a big believer that players play, coaches coach, and managers manage. That being said, it is the province of management to ask questions of the coaching staff, and there have been instances, and I can't pinpoint one in particular, where I've asked the question, to a coach, why did you do this in this instance? Why did you put that line on the ice at that point in the game? That's fair ball for a manager to ask a coach. Or, why did you make a shift in your lines and put this player up with these guys and move, the other player down? So that does occur. But in terms of, when Alain Vigneault or Mike Babcock used to, opine to me or tell me what they thought we should do with respect to signing a player or getting a player, I used to, my patent line to them was like, I don't tell you how to do the controlled breakout. Don't tell us who to sign and how much. Just do your job. Just coach the team.
Guessing one of those guys had a bigger opinion on personnel than others, but
yeah.
We digress.
I haven't met too many coaches who don't have an opinion.
Fair enough. As I always say, players want to coach, coaches want to manage, managers want to own, and owners want to play. Oh, and the other thing about coaches, there'll be a guy that management likes, that the fans like, that the coach has no time for, and will say all sorts of things behind the scenes. And there'll be a veteran guy on the team that coach just can't live without, and management and the fan base are going, it's time to move this guy on. Forever. Forever.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And coaches will go out and set themselves, go out and prove themselves correct. This guy can't play for me, and then they'll go put him in situations where they fail.
Yeah, exactly. Just to demonstrate it. Okay, let's talk playoff chase here for a second, because going into St. Louis tomorrow, Laurence, biggest game of the regular season, or at least biggest one since last week's game in Calgary. The Blues have been extraordinary since the Four Nations break. How big of a threat do you perceive St. Louis to be here down the stretch? And are the two favorites in your eyes Vancouver and St. Louis?
Well, first of all, I believe St. Louis is their chances of making the playoffs are greater than the Vancouver Canucks at this point in time. I think schedule favors them clearly. They play Nashville a couple more times. They play Chicago. The Canucks, you point to this road trip, they're playing 6 games against teams that are either playoff teams or sufficiently within striking distance that they're not giving up on the season. So if I were handicapping it today, I would say that St. Louis makes the playoffs ahead of the Canucks. When I look at the other teams that they're competing with, Utah, Calgary, I do like the Canucks' chances more, but I want to give you a proviso, and that's based on the fact that you've got a healthy Philip Heel. As good as Pius Suter played yesterday as a second-line center, and as well as Teddy Bluger played as a third-line center, I think if you're going to go down the stretch with, Pettersson, Suter, Blugas, and Omen as your 4 centers, that's tough. Like, you're pushing a big snowball up a hill with that. So do I think, a healthy Canucks team is better than Calgary and Utah? Yes. Do I think they are in their present iteration? Not so much.
Is there a chance that the Canucks can catch anybody in the top 3 in the Pacific Division, do you think? It's one thing for the Blues to get that wild card spot, but is there a chance, or have the struggles of the Oilers and Kings been put behind them?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, Blake, but in order for that to occur, the Canucks are going to have to catch lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
They're going to have to get Hedl back for sure. You're going to have Lankinen play lights out. And look, if they play like they played last night, sure, it's possible. And obviously getting Quinn Hughes back is a major, major shot in the arm for the team. And now that Elias Pettersson is playing the way, or Elias Pettersson, I never know what the pronunciation is.
Matters now, Laurence. It never used to matter. It matters now.
Now it matters.
I saw Brendan Bassler's lines. He's got each guy by initial, so EP40, right? Yeah. So if EP40 plays to EP40's level as a bona fide top end number 1 center iceman, if all that stuff occurs, they do have a chance.
Since we're talking Pettersson here, Laurence, part of this turnaround, and look, it's not the reason for it. At least it's not the only reason for it. But a couple weeks back, he sat in there in a media scrum. The demeanor was completely different. He wasn't sullen. He wasn't curt. He wasn't standoffish, and basically said, look, I got to take accountability for this season. I'm a better player. I spouted off about, the media and how much of a pain it is. Just don't get me wrong. It is not the media's fault. This is on me. You've managed in 2 really big fish bowls, Toronto and Vancouver. Where have you and your colleagues on the management side stood in terms of a player having to take responsibility and accountability publicly with the fans?
Well, it's always better when they do. And, the media are people the same way, well, you guys are media, but, they're no different. People like accountability, and they like, humility. And when a player steps forward and says, I haven't been good enough, and I understand that's, that softens the whole environment, not just for him, but for everybody around him. And I think that interview and that was a point which took the air, like the hard air, out of that dressing room and out of that team, and it allowed everybody to exhale and to some extent just go play. And that's definitely been the case with EP40. And I witnessed, in my opinion, the same sort of thing with Brock Boeser, yesterday or the day before, when he made the comment about how he needs to focus on how good it is to play in this league, and not overthink things and just go out and play. And he looked like a player who had the weight of the world lifted off his shoulders yesterday. And you could see it I watched it. You could see it in warm up. He looked relaxed and composed and comfortable in his own skin. And I hadn't seen that in the last number of weeks. That's for sure.
8 points in his last 7 games right now. The Canucks pro scouting department has done a great job on a couple of finds, if you will. And, the Dakota Joshua contract is now taking on a different sort of perception because he's had such a tough year, but I think that one's explainable. But they got him on a song really when they acquired him, and he overperformed that early contract, and that was a great idea. They did the same with Pius Suter. They saw more in that player. They got him on a really cheap contract, and he has outperformed that contract. What do you do though with those players? Because now that they have to be paid sort of commensurate with the market, do you keep anteing up for that player that you found? They were a fabulous steal then. What do you do with Pius Suter now that he's a 20-goal man? Do you continue to go down that road with the player? Does that player owe you something? Do you think there's a hometown discount to be had there? How do you think that works for the Canucks?
Nobody owes anybody anything. And my experience with players is, there is, when a player is happy in an environment and likes the organization and the city, they are willing to play ball with you and take a little less. Mm-hmm. But in the case of Pius Suter, I just want to say he's not just a 20-goal scorer. He's a 20-goal scorer who's playing on your second power play unit, your first penalty killing unit, and is what I would refer to, or what we used to call a seventh forward, who is a Swiss Army knife player who can move up into your top six. That's a valuable commodity. And yes, he is going to get paid on July 1st with the cap going up as much as it is. And sometimes you do pay the player. Sometimes you don't. We did it with Alex Burrows when we had Alex Burrows on a contract that far, he outperformed that contract so significantly. We knew that we had to do right by this player, because if we didn't, we were going to lose a 30-goal scoring winger, and at the same time we were going to lose our standing and stature with our own players and our group and our culture, because we, for lack of a better expression, exploited this player in the prior contract. So I don't know what they're going to do. You can't pay everybody. Obviously, you have a lot of happy general managers and people running teams around the league, because salary cap is going to go up as much as it is, which is going to provide a lot of breathing room. But you can make mistakes. Like, there are trapdoors and landmines in this business, and there have been many teams that have been burned by overpaying their own players.
But the devil though too, right? The devil versus the
absolutely,
yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I mean,
one of Lawrence's credos.
I said early on in the year, I thought that, listen, I'm a big fan of the Canucks pro scouting staff. I know them all very, very well, and I do think they've done an exceptional job year after year. I think they go about applying their trade well. And Pius Suter's a great example. Kevin Lankinen's a great example too. But sometimes you win one, and you can lose it in the next round because the player doesn't play to the level of the contract increase.
That's the worry.
And as Laurence has shared with us many times, goes back to one of his mentors, Cliff Fletcher, that you better know the player you're sending out, because there's a pretty much 100% chance you're going to know less about the player that you're bringing in by way of a replacement. Laurence, AFP Analytics has Suter at 4 by just under $4 million per. Do you sign that deal?
Probably. Again, I'm like, the utility is the critical value for me. He's not just he's not just a 20. Look, you look at the body of work. Detroit let him. Chicago let him go because they knew they were going to get smoked in their salary arbitration, or he was going to be. They didn't qualify him, so they figured they'd be killed the salary arb, and then Detroit stepped up and paid him, and paid him fair market value, or maybe a little more than fair market value, for a guy who was a 15 goal scoring two-way center. But centers are valuable, and two-way centers are really valuable. And with the cap going up the way it is, I think there's going to be a team that steps up and pays close to $4 million for this guy, for sure.
While we're talking centers, let me bounce this idea off of you.
Here we go.
I sent you a text. I feel like I need to explain the text I sent you last week.
You're going to badger every single one of our guests on this pet project.
Come on, this guy is built for this question. I have to ask him about this.
Here we go. You've been warned, Laurence.
So the Canucks go and trade a second-round pick for the third-round pick that is theirs, that is now residing in Montreal, because, and again, this is an idea, folks. That didn't just happen. I'm not breaking news. Because then they can offer sheet somebody in the summer. We've seen that happen. I believe that happened last year with the two successful St. Louis Blues offer sheets to the Montreal or the Edmonton Oilers. Is that something that the Canucks should do just so they have it in their back pocket as an avenue to acquire this? Like, I don't know where they're getting centers. We've talked about this already with you. It's a third avenue in which they can go and get a center, trade, UFA, but is an RFA offer sheet something that they should have in their back pocket as well?
Well, in a perfect world, they would like to own their pick that Montreal currently possesses, so that they do have that option. One could make an argument that yes, it would be prudent to make some kind of deal, and hopefully you can make some kind of hockey deal. You always need to be thinking as creatively as possible. And it doesn't have to necessarily be, we give you a second round pick to get our third round back, because Montreal has needs too, and they're an evolving hockey team. So there could be a deal that gets framed whereby the third round pick does come back to the Canucks and they give up something else, some other form of capital. But yeah, it probably would be a good thing to do. I mean, the league saw last year that, and again, Doug Armstrong did it. He went to Pittsburgh, he got his draft picks that he had given up, his draft pick that he had given up back, that put him in the position to be able to make the offer sheet. And then he turned and sent the nuclear bomb over to Edmonton. And, it's worked out pretty well for him. And if his team makes the playoffs, I think there's going to be a lot of general managers that think, you know what, maybe I should make an offer sheet or two this year. And
can you threaten that and just make a trade instead? Like, the other part of my pet project is Marco Rossi in Minnesota. Can you call Bill Guerin and say, listen, I'm going to offer sheet your guy anyway. Do you want to just trade instead?
Brian Burke did that to Peter Chiarelli over Phil Kessel. He said, if you don't trade him to me, I'm going to make an offer. I'm going to sign him to an offer sheet. And Chiarelli ended up making a deal. If I'm not mistaken, ended up getting Dougie Hamilton out of that deal. And somebody else too.
Tyler Seguin.
Right. Tyler Seguin and Dougie Hamilton for Phil Kessel. Not a bad deal for Peter Chiarelli and the Boston Bruins at the time. But yes, it has been done in the past, and it is an option. Trade him to me, or I'll offer sheet him.
You guys were big fans of offer sheets. I mean, you two were new on the block here in Vancouver. Immediately came out of the gates offer sheeting David Backes in St. Louis and Steve Bernier in Buffalo. Yes. Way back when.
Yeah, well, that's I mean, it's
mixed results there.
Well, there were, and I think at the end of the day, we did the St. Louis Blues a favor because David Backes, we were right in our assessment of this player and where we thought his trajectory was headed. And, at the end of the day, I think St. Louis was pretty darn happy as that contract evolved that we had done that to them. But, the league is littered with offer sheets that haven't gone the way the tender thought they would go. And obviously a big one was that Dustin Penner deal that Edmonton, signed when Penner was coming off, good season, I think a Stanley Cup season with the Anaheim Ducks. And, Brian Burke let Dustin Penner go. And again, that was the right move. And I think if Edmonton, those that were running the Edmonton Oilers at that time, could go back in time, they would have not tendered the offer sheet that they did. So, listen, this one in the case of St. Louis Blues has worked out fairly well. But it's caveat emptor. Buyer beware when you put one of those things out there.
Including a very smart front office in Carolina with Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Not sure they still love that one.
No, exactly.
Laurence, marvelous stuff. Thank you for this. We will catch up next week.
Always a pleasure, guys. Have a good week.